Yo, grade 9s, hope you're going well. Welcome to history. Apologies I'm not there with you today, but hopefully we can get through some cool stuff here. So what we're doing today is we're going to be looking at historic newspapers. So we're going to go to this website here, Trove, and what this gives us access to is newspapers from decades and hundreds of years ago, which is really, really cool. So the website up here, trove.nla.gov.au, make sure you're there when your teacher directs you. You're welcome to go there now if you want and follow along with me, if that's okay with your teacher. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to, on this website, once you get here, we want to go to digitized newspapers. So, trove.nla.gov.au, make sure you're there, and then click here on newspapers. Cool. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go advanced search because we are advanced people. Cool, so we're digitized newspapers and into advanced search. Now you're welcome to pause this at any time you want or rewind it so you can go back and see the steps. Okay, and here we are at our advanced search page. What we're going to do is we're going to be looking for newspaper articles from during World War I. First thing we're going to do is go to our date down here. And we want stuff, so World War I started in July 1914. So I'm going to chuck in 1914 here. Sorry, 1914, not 1949. And we're going to chuck in 1918 here, which is the year World War I ended. Okay, and it kind of fills in the dates there for me. So now it's saying from the start of 1914 to the end of 1918, and that's fine by me. Cool. Now I'm going to go up to here to my searched words. So I'm going to tell it what do I want to look for. So what's going to happen is I'm going to plug in a particular word here, and then this website is going to search all the newspapers for this particular word. So what word do I want? Here are some suggested words for you. War. Now if you type in war, you actually get a really, really broad range of things. You get poems, you get things talking about things not related to World War I. So you don't necessarily, you can type in war, but some of these other words are probably going to be a bit better for you. Enlist. Enlist means to join the army. Fight, battle, France. Heaps, probably most for Australians of the fighting happened in France. And the last one here, Gallipoli. Okay. Now, don't search World War I. The reason for that is it would have been very pessimistic for them to call the war World War I when it started.
Hamish Anderson to the kiss and drop. Hamish Anderson to the kiss and drop.
Apologies there. Yeah, so don't type in World War I because they didn't call it World War I there because that would have been horribly pessimistic. Cool. Okay, so once you've chosen one of those, chuck them in here. So I'm going to type in enlist. Last thing we want to do, well, actually, I'll talk you through a couple of things you can play with. You can search where you want it to be, so you can have it in anywhere in the article, or you can have it in the heading or in the title of the article as well. So we're reading newspaper articles, so if you just want it in the body of the text, you just go anywhere in the article, or if you want headings, just type there. I would leave it with anywhere to start with, so you can play around with it a bit later. Okay. Here's a really cool thing, places and titles. So now we get to say which newspapers do we want to look through. And here currently it's divided into states. Let's click on South Australia. That'll just give us South Australian newspapers. What we can do as well, and this is really interesting, is go show titles. And this shows us all the different newspapers that have been active in South Australia. So they go back to, let's see what the earliest ones we can find are, 1878. The Advertiser was running around this time as well, so if we can find it, never mind, 1839, we're not going to get much earlier than that. That's really cool. Okay, anyway, so you can play around with that. The really cool thing is you can find some rural places here. So Blythe, for example, that's a town about 2 hours north of Australia, north of Adelaide. This is interesting. This is obviously a German newspaper. Australische Zeitung. Interesting to see what that newspaper had to say during World War I. And interestingly enough, this newspaper stopped in 1916. I'll let you guess the reason for that, and you can tell me when I get back. Border Chronicle, Border Town, Mount Gambier, Gawler, etc. So have a play with this. I'm just going to leave it as South Australia for the moment, and it's going to include all of these. If I don't want them, I can get rid of them, and it's going to disappear. Well, maybe not, I'm not sure. It's being funny. Cool, so I'm going to go all of South Australia. Cool. And that's it. Now I'm just going to go search. And what you're going to see is it's giving me all the newspaper articles from 1914 to 1916 from all of South Australia that has the word enlist in it, which is cool. Now, what I want you to do is I don't want you to rush this part. I want you to play around. I want you just to have some fun and see what you can see. I really find this stuff really interesting. So you are welcome for the first 5, 10, 15 minutes just to play around and see what you can see. Kind of exploring and trialing and erroring and clicking on different articles is half the fun here. So feel free. So you've got these questions here to answer eventually. These ones here. But feel free just to explore and play around for the first 15 minutes because it's really, really interesting stuff. Cool. Okay. Back to the articles. So here we go. This one here is from the Victor Harbour Times. Most of us have been to Victor Harbour. It was from Friday the 16th of July, 1915. To get into them, we click here. Now, what you're going to see is a couple of things. One, you're going to have the original newspaper here. So we can zoom out. And we can see the whole newspaper, which is really, really cool. So again, feel free to play around with this stuff. And you're welcome just to kind of zoom in and see what you can see. So Stars versus Locos. Stars versus Elliots, United States opinion of the German nation. Interesting, that's cool. So the United States was neutral in World War I for quite a while. They came in late in World War I. I will talk about why they came into World War I a bit later. So feel free just to look around and see what you can see. Returned and Wounded Soldiers Fund, that's really cool. Lots of the articles around this time are going to be related to the war. So feel free to look around and see what you can see. Potted plants for the fund. So the fund would be the war fund. So feel free just to look around and see what you can see. Here, enlist. The enlistment fever has been rampant in the harbour during the past week, and 9 from this part have offered themselves. We believe that Mr. W.M. Henderson has offered his services. The balance of the number is made up by, and there are the people. So that's the list of all the people that have enlisted. So if you joined the war, people were so proud of you that they would put your names in the newspaper, which is really interesting. So if I'm looking at my questions over here, what were people's attitudes towards the war? You could say they were proud of their sons or friends or community members who joined it. And why would you say that? Well, because they bothered discussing it in the newspaper. Cool. Also, the tone of that article is pretty upbeat. They're not saying, they're excited by it. They're not sad about it. Cool. Let's just go back. We've got all these different articles all about enlist. Let's look at this one here. So this one is from the Register, which is a newspaper that no longer exists in Adelaide. Now what you're going to notice is the original text is sometimes hard to read. Sometimes it's not, but sometimes it is. Also, when you look over here, you're going to see that there are errors in this text over here. The reason for that is that all these things were scanned from a hard copy newspaper into a digital format, and then a very clever program converted the text from printed to digital. Now that very clever program, albeit very clever, isn't perfect, and sometimes it makes mistakes. And instead of saying His Excellency, the program looked at that and thought it said HE Excellency, which is obviously wrong. Often what I do is I go through and I edit it just because I'm a great bloke. You can do that too if you want, but you need to quickly fill out do one of those prove you're not a robot things. Cool. His Excellency the Governor has undertaken a public spirited and patriotic mission in endeavouring to stimulate recruiting in South Australia. Okay, this would be a really interesting article. So it's talking about how the Governor, so the Queen's representative in Australia, has gone around telling people to sign up for the war. So here, what were people's attitudes? The government, the officials were eager to get people to sign up for it. Cool. Okay, I'll stop talking you through this. I'll just quickly recap. So, when you are searching, make sure you're in advanced searching. Yes, I want to leave. So, here's the home page. We go to advanced searching. So we go to digitized newspapers, and then we go to advanced. We want to go to advanced to get our years in there. And again, you can choose any of these words, or if you're interested in something in particular, for example, and I'll write this down there as well, you could write women. You could write women in there, or you could write whatever. So let's just write battle, see what we get. Battle from, this is important, doing the dates is really important, 1914 to 1918. Again, you can go other places if you want, but I'm just going to go South Australia because it's cool to see places that you know about. Cool. You don't need to worry about any of this. You can play with it if you want. Hit search, and then we're going to see all this stuff. Baltic battle, interesting. The battle, cool. Battle side highlights. Battle sidelights. Cool. This is about the Gallipoli battle, which is really cool. Okay. So again, I want you to I'm really hoping you enjoy this and have a bit of fun with it. So I encourage you, type in some things. Feel free to zoom in and zoom out and see what else you can see. Science and the criminal, what conscription means. This is interesting. We're going to be talking about conscription later. Conscription is where the government forces you to join the army and go fight in a war. We're going to be talking about that a bit later. So look around, play with this, have some fun, share your ideas with each other. Stay on task in that you're looking at these ideas. But like I said, you're welcome just to see where it takes you for the first 15 minutes. And then once you've kind of got the hang of it, do answer these questions. I want you to aim to have around 300 words in total answering these things. So when I say 2 things learned about the war, don't just write, it happened in 1914, they fought at Gallipoli. Boring, fail. What I want you to do is I want you to tell me what you learned, why that's interesting, how you learned it, go into detail, give me the specifics of what you learned. Same thing here, what were people's attitudes to the war? This is the important bit. How did you know? How did you know what the attitudes are? Cool. 2 things you found interesting or surprising. Again, go into detail, give me detailed answers. And finally, how do people respond to death? It won't take you too long before you come across an article that talks about some people who died in the war. And if you can't find it, what you can do then is simply search for the word death and you'll be able to find it. Or they often say sacrifice. So I want you to find some times when they talk about death, and I want you to talk about that there as well. Okay, that's your task for this double lesson, grade 9s. Thank you heaps. Have a great day, and I'll see you on Monday. Thanks, folks. Good luck.